we need a library, we need parking, we need a plaza, and then anything else is superfluous and good, right? Potentially. So we're looking at the idea, I've seen it in a lot of other communities, and it seems to be kind of catching on as an idea, as close to either housing or hotels, or kind of building together with kind of building in a nice audience with a library. So that was kind of the concept that we were going here. And so I really wanted both of us to come to you and see, one, kind of what's the most important things that you want in an RFP? What are your needs? And I know you're doing the needs study this year, so kind of making sure that is a part of what we talk about going out to the public, and trying to figure out what's actually needed within the RFP, so that any public-private partnership, a private entity can see, what they need to include in any kind of proposals. So the first step is here, talking to you guys and getting some ideas and getting your feedback on what this idea could be. Second step is going to the infrastructure committee, letting them know that we're gonna look at doing some of this. And then to the full BOA, to kind of just make sure that everybody's on board with this idea. The good and bad news is that this RFP is just gonna be kind of an open question. We are not required to take any action if we get proposals. It's just kind of see what's out there in the private entity market, to see if we can get renovations to the library, a new library, and anything that might help move this forward. I know libraries are really important for building community and retaining employees, and so that's kind of why economic development is interested in the library. But so that's kind of where we're starting here. So essentially, we would be looking at kind of the city-owned spaces and saying, what are your ideas for this space, and can you pull together more spaces that could potentially build out those ideas. So that's where kind of we're starting. I know that there's lots of questions about this and how it would work. We don't have a lot of answers because we're in the process of just figuring out what's out there. But I know there's a library plaza renovation on the books. I think the windows made it onto the ad hoc committee, maybe? Is that right?
Masonry, I believe.
Oh, masonry, okay.
None of those results were shared. I had not received them.
Oh, okay, all right, so, but that was, I think, the 5-year, 5th year would be when you would receive some money for that. So that's the only thing that made it to the ad hoc committee.
So part of the conversation when we made our proposal to the ad hoc committee was that there were several board members that said, could you piecemeal it? Could you do piece by piece?
Oh,
and I think
okay.
our response was, it would be less expensive to do it all at once. And I'm just wondering where
Right.
the Economic Development Committee kind of is in that piece. Is it your expectation that it would be piecemeal?
Yeah, it would have to, based on what the final results of that ad hoc committee, and I think it's going to the board next week for approval. The only thing that made it to that list was, I believe, $7 million for masonry and windows. So it would be a piecemeal approach, but you're at year 5 already, so the first 4 years, you would not receive any bonded money.
So,
and then it would be $7 million, I believe, in that last year. And then the process starts all over again to then reprioritize that next 5 years.
so let me just rephrase what you've told us to make sure everybody is understanding, because listening to you, it sounds like you already know, we all know what you're talking about.
Okay.
And my understanding, from the very little I was given before this meeting, because I understand there's precedents and we don't want to just get out. What you're talking about is getting a private developer in to look at our parking lot, where we are sitting right now, our plaza, all the land owned by the city that the library sits on, and getting a private-public partnership to redevelop that land. So potentially, you're talking about, we tear down this building, we put up a new library building, which may have some apartments attached to it, which may have shops attached to it, which may have a hotel attached to it. But you're basically talking not about refurbishing this building, I mean, most likely, but starting fresh with a developer's vision with our input on the library side. Is that, I mean, that's kind of,
Possibly.
that's the
that is-
extreme end of it.
Yes, so I would say that is a possibility, but we don't really know what developers are out there, whether they would love to renovate this kind of building, or if they would love to start fresh, right? So that's kind of just what we're looking to get when we put this RFP out there, is just, we don't know who's out there that would be willing to do either one. And so we wanna kind of see what the market says, so that is a potential, and it's potential that it could be renovated as well. So we're kind of in the process of, the RFP needs to be done in order to figure out what those possibilities actually are.
But no matter what, we're looking at a partnership. The chances of a developer coming in and saying, you know, what I really wanna do is renovate a 50-year-old Brutalist building. And hey, they've already got the plaza going, so that's awesome, let's go. That's not what we're looking at. We're looking at a developer coming in and saying, I want to be able to add value to the city by doing something that also adds value to me, the developer.
Yeah, I would say that's
I mean,
likely.
it's, for example, I mean, in Laconia, they recently renovated the Colonial Theater, which is a beautiful historic building, and they built some apartments on the back.
Yeah.
To help them. That's the sort of thing you're talking about, except we don't have a historic.
Yes, and
But we
it
do,
might add more parcels too, to the, can you show which ones are?
Yeah, what,
Yeah, and
I'm trying to picture what's,
well, I think
besides us.
there are assets that the library site on a larger scale has that the Colonial Theater didn't. You know, big ones.
That's just, I just.
No, it's a great example though. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
the library and the adjacent area has land. And land presents tremendous opportunity for all of the uses that we've talked about tonight: hotel, residential, parking, a library. But to your point, there has to be, in order to enter into a private-public partnership, unless you have a nonprofit development partner, which is unlikely, there has to be something that makes the development financially feasible. And that's, that's whether that's housing, or whether it's, a hotel or retail, or whatever it might be, or a conference center, who knows. Those are the things that we don't really understand the market around those things. And so that's why, it's multiple parallel tracks at the same time. You're gonna be doing some work over the next year to understand sort of the space needs of the library, because that's one path you go down. You go down the path of repurposing this building, making modifications. We need to understand that. This path is low cost because it's literally just a call to the market to say, hey, what would the options be? But it sort of opens things up to potentially only re-envision this area while still keeping the core function, which is the library, right? Like, that is a core tenet that we're not suggesting moving on from. But I think what we're trying to do is move this project up in the ad hoc capital plan by creating an alternative source of funding, whether that's through the developer itself, whether it's an extension of the tax increment finance district that exists in this area. There are a lot of different options, but we can't really speak to the development community in the place that we're in right now because there hasn't been an open conversation about these ideas. We're looking at an RFP as the way to allow us to do that, recognizing that if this were ever to move forward in the future, there would have to be public conversations, there'd have to be real visioning, there'd have to be incredible engagement with the Board of Aldermen and all of you. But we don't know what we don't know right now, I think is how we're feeling, and we'd like to just understand what's out there.
Yeah. And I don't think there's gonna be anything that really comes of this in this process, but it'll give us an idea of where we'd like to head, right? Do we wanna head towards bigger development of the downtown area, the riverfront, or do we want to continue on the path that we're on, which is renovating the library, right? So, this just gives us an idea when we go out to the market and see. Maybe it's a bad idea. We don't know yet.
At the risk of getting a little too excited about this, I mean, we have received inquiries about not necessarily the library itself, but about this area from developers. There are a variety of things going on here that are really cool. You have a waterfront redevelopment happening. You have the library itself and the Plaza project. There's a lot of value that I think the development community sees, but again, we've sort of said to them, look, the first priority project here is the library and figuring out what the long-term home looks like for that. We can't have this conversation with you right now. Yeah.
So can you explain, I guess, what I'm hearing is that there's like a lot of area that is underdeveloped around the library, right? And so you're saying it may make sense to bring in a developer to help us look at a larger area, and we might be more likely to get funding if we do that. That's what I'm hearing. Yep, okay. What are we looking at here? Like, what are these yellow things? I guess I don't understand.
Yeah. So yeah, fair enough. So let's just kind of walk through what we see here, and I'll try to call.
I guess there's a potential that you're seeing.
No, absolutely. And we'll stick to the public assets, I think, tonight.
Yep.
But there's this whole other question in our mind. If we were to put out an RFP for the public sites, would an adjacent private property owner be interested in doing something? Maybe. I mean, we don't really know.
Yeah.
But I'll start with the most odd piece, and that is this right-of-way area. We have Hartshorn Ave, that's technically a road. We have Cottage Street, that's technically a road. Those provide critical access, so those will be part of the RFP, but there still has to be road access, obviously, to the site. There's this parking lot right here. That's currently library parking. This is a public asset, obviously, and you can see the parking extends into the road right-of-way, which is a little weird, but that's just the situation. We have this parking lot right over here, which is a city-owned asset as well, but I think somewhat infrequently used. I'm not really sure.
Well, it was only recently turned back to the city, so
Right.
until
Right.
maybe a few months ago.
Yeah.
A year ago?
I think more than-
Yeah.
Before me. So,
Just before, yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's almost never used. In
Yeah.
conclusion, neither the library nor 30 Temple Street really uses
Yep.
that.
You do have these privately owned lots that, we're not including in this conversation, but you have, a privately owned lot here. We don't know what that property owner's plans might be. It's a question. We have a privately owned lot here that's used for sure, but then we have the primary parcel, which is of course the library, and it's parking lot to the rear, the site itself, and the surrounding plaza area. That's really the public space that we're talking about here, but then there's also this piece back here, which is the riverfront. That's an active pathway. There are plans for that, albeit not plans to improve immediately, but there is the idea of improving this pathway back here. But all in all, and I always
I am gonna get you some trees tomorrow night, hopefully.
I always hesitate to start marking things up live because I'm terrible at it, but you're generally talking about. Yeah, I'm already gonna screw this up, so we're not gonna do this.
This is not, yeah.
We're not
that's
gonna do
what
that.
it-
You generally get a sense of the area that we're talking about, and it's not square. It's not a prime development area as it exists right now because it's not one box, but it's still a lot of land area.
Yeah.
I noticed you did not include 14 Court Street in your.
I did not, and that's.
Well, there's conversations around what that could be. I think they're doing a study right now, about what that could be, or what, do we keep it a theater, do we make it something else? So they're in the process of figuring out what that even looks like right now. And then there is a private business in the front side, that is renting from us. So we'd have to figure that out as well, but, it's a possibility, but likely we wouldn't include it in an initial RFP, just, as until we figure it out down the line. It might end up in the full thing, but for right now, I think we're gonna leave it out. I think too, my thought process around this, which I think is why I wanna pursue this idea, is the library is important, and it didn't get much love from that ad hoc bonding committee, and so I'd like to figure out how to get it some love. And this is kind of the next idea, and we'll see if it works, if it doesn't. But I'm just trying to figure out some options for how to help the library be better for the community, have better space for the community, have space that you need. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how a partnership like this works? Because as you said, we didn't get a lot of love. We never have.
Yeah.
Like how does this help us 20 years from now, right? Like the city still has to take care of the library at some point.
So that's something else that could come of this is there are 1,000 different ways that this could play out in terms of ownership, in terms of partnership. I think we're just
Too early.
Too early to figure out what that would actually look like. But if something is important to you, if ownership or, I mean, we could try to work those into the conversation.
The big thing is, this land has value to a developer. And, you know, you've been talking about, and I know that you didn't get a lot of love, but I think there were, I don't wanna say there were reasons for that, but there are things that we can do to better position the project to be successful. Which sounds like such a like, you know, seriously, I think there are, but the property has value, and that's kind of what we're thinking. Can you cut down that $30 million really quickly by passing on a value to a developer, whether it be for-profit or non-profit developer, thus putting the project in a position where maybe it's only a $10 million project to get a brand new facility, maybe it's only, you know, maybe, I don't know,
Yeah.
we don't know, we simply don't know right now. I mean,
I'm sorry, if you did have a public-private partnership, would the library lose any decision-making control over content and programming?
that's a down the road question, but, well, as far as content programming, we should be clear about that. This would be a public library, it would have the same governance that the current library has. There's a different question that's more, it's kind of like the lease versus own question, and I think we all maybe have our thoughts on that. That's a down the road thing too, that I think would be very negotiable, quite honestly. I mean, you can condoize, and anyway, there are options there.
Down the road is my question, because the page of links that we all have, are articles about libraries, I should say, branches of library systems that have entered into these partnerships, and some of them have their new buildings. In looking at them, I noticed two things. One is they are, I think, all, or if not all but one, branches. In other words, they are satellite libraries in a specific neighborhood that when they were rebuilt, when they were envisioned to meet the needs of that neighborhood and the needs of the type of housing that was going with them. One of them was a senior housing, one of them was immigrant housing. So they're very focused. They were all branches. We're all the city's got right now.
Are you worried about the construction time?
And one concern I have is the construction time.
Yeah.
And the other because,
So
depending on what they do, potentially, you know, they're knocking this down and putting up something beautiful and fresh and new and a better use of space and all of that, which would be awesome. But the timeline of what happens to us during that time is a concern. The other concern I have is the scale. Because it's very easy to do this kind of targeted kumbaya approach for a branch, because you have the other libraries in the city taking up some of the slack,
Okay.
et cetera. And you can make it targeted and you can make it smaller. But we're, as I said, we're all the city's got. So I
Right.
wonder about things like parking. I wonder about things like putting in housing, and then the city, which owns our property, and so the city can put on whatever event it would like to put on in the city property outside the library. We now have apartments and we have a Pride Festival, which we've just heard at the start of this would not sit well necessarily. So if we are going to have three masters, Board of Trustees, the city, and a developer who's got other assets that are part of us that we have an arrangement with, how is all that gonna work? How are we going to be able, how is the city going to be able to use what was once their space? Maybe they just take the, the big events, like the Nashua goes back to school, they take them someplace else.
I think,
I mean, I know those are questions down the road, but I think there's serious concerns, and the other one I have is parking. Because we're looking at, well, gee, and look, there's all this space here that belongs to, and that's the parking.
right.
But now you're gonna have people, if you do have something that has restaurants, you're gonna have people coming to the restaurants. If you have housing, you're gonna have the housing cars, and then the library wants to put on one of their big events.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, those are the kinds of,
That is one of the things that I was, gonna just say is we did have the downtown, parking study done recently. And we did identify this location as a potential need for a garage. So another 500 to 600 parking spaces. So those needs,
that
we
would
could
all the
also,
questions.
yes, well, those needs we could also, accommodate potentially in this idea. But to get to your major point is we decide what our non-negotiables are and we don't do it if they won't. And so the non-negotiable is the library maintains whatever, yes. So it's, we decide what our non-negotiables are together. And then we decide what kind of developer we would like to go with, if this is even an idea that is workable, right?
What happens to our plaza renovation, because that's in this
Yeah.
outline, and I don't wanna lose that money.
And
Yes.
the timing of it all, because I can see, I mean, this would be a big undertaking. It would require a lot of time to get the RFPs, to get the public input, to make decisions. It would be a very big undertaking, and I can see us in parallel going on with the plaza,
So,
but then,
I'll just
Yeah.
speak to the RFP quickly and then the plaza is all yours. The RFP process, I don't think is gonna be that big of a project in this initial phase.
yeah, I'm thinking, let me back up, I'm thinking of like the whole thing. You know, if we decide, wow, we did get some awesome RFPs,
Oh, yeah.
this is
Okay.
something we definitely wanna do, but now we've got the plaza underway.
Okay, I'll let you.
We don't,
You're not gonna love this answer.
we don't wanna spend money on the
We
plaza
are-
if
we
we're
are-
gonna lose it.
And I'll go back to the parallel track idea. We are keeping our foot on the gas pedal when it comes to the plaza. In a way, we're pretending that this conversation is not happening because number one, we have a federal award that we're trying to execute in a timely manner.
That's, yeah.
We have a tremendous amount of public support for the plaza project, obviously, and we've worked with you and director and others to move that forward. We are a little bit held up right now due to environmental issues, and I can't even make eye contact with Director McCormick. It's been very challenging, but, you know, we have some time, although we don't love that, we have some time to kind of figure this out. But we're proceeding with that plaza project unless there is a significant change of direction over the next 6 months. And let me just talk about that. We believe that the plaza money could be pivoted to another location on the site. Now, have we spent design money? Yes. Have we gotten this point to a point where we're doing environmental and we're looking at the constraints of the site? Yes. I don't believe, though, that we would be abandoning the federal award in the event that we needed to move the green space to another section of the site.
So that would be another non-negotiable
That's
within
correct.
that RFP
That's correct.
process.
That we still have plaza space.
A plaza.
That's
It
correct.
doesn't necessarily have to be in the same location, but.
So the parking lot could become the plaza, and the plaza could become the parking lot.
The plaza
Yeah,
could
yeah.
be the riverfront
In-
area.
in-
Yeah,
Yep,
we
yep,
could take over the riverfront with the plaza.
yep. So I don't wanna suggest we're putting good money,
Yeah.
I don't wanna suggest that we're putting good money into a bad project, because I believe that we will proceed with the Library Plaza project. But it's possible the location of that could potentially be moved in the event that there's some larger change of direction. But we're so far away from that, I think, although it will be a relatively short RFP,
Yeah.
we're far away from pivoting to a radically different concept. And so I think I have to move forward with
Yeah.
Plaza.
Yeah, and I would say too that this RFP is just an idea, right? We don't know what the market's gonna bring. We might not have a developer that would wanna do this. And we do have inquiries, but, who knows at this point? So I would not hold up on anything, while we're looking into this. Oh.
I don't know what just happened.
While we're looking into this process.
Did I do that?
I don't know, it just happened.
I think someone hit the remote.
I don't know what chair.
So if you're looking for our suggestions, like one of my, and I'm one member, I would like a detached, I would like a library detached from
Okay,
other areas. I don't know if everyone else agrees, but.
okay.
So in other words, we're still our own, we have our own
Building.
entrance, our
Yeah.
own building, our.
Even if the land has shared functions.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
Is it, or do you wanna be, I don't wanna say isolated, but you wanna be totally independent? Or a situation like Burton's at the Pheasant Lane Mall, where they are physically attached to the rest of the mall, but the only way to get into it is through their specific entrance.
What does everyone else think?
Pardon?
And
Oh, what does everyone else
Would
think?
we
Oh,
put a parking garage underneath it, if
Mm.
that,
Yeah,
you know, could that work?
that's a logistic question. What were the timelines for the RFP? Like, just, like,
It would essentially be, so we're gonna go to the infrastructure committee, then we'll go to the BOA, and make sure that everybody's on board with this idea. And then it's just kind of putting it out there. So probably a month or two, to get it out there, and then it'll be out there for a month or two. So we're looking at probably, oh God, January almost.
Winter review.
Where'd the time go? But, yeah, like December, January, we would then get some idea of what the market has for us to look at. And at that point, then we could decide if this is a feasible option to start looking at, or we continue down the path of where we're already going.
And what do you see as the deliverable for the people who respond to the RFP? Are you looking for like a real rough mock-up of, we want a hotel here, and we want a restaurant there, and we want the library in the center, and here's a plaza, or are you just looking for a narrative?
I would definitely love a visual. I don't think that
I mean, there's a lot
just
of-
knowing developers, they're not gonna spend a lot of money doing
That's- yeah,
renderings
this
or
is-
anything like that.
This is why I'm asking,
Because
what
they-
do you expect? to get?
Yeah, so I would love to have an idea of what spaces are where, and what they're proposing. Visually, but,
Uses,
Yeah.
concept level, and how they would arrange such a project.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing they may be very non-committal about several of the things I've just said.
Mhm.
yeah.
But you sort of find out what their preferred structure would be. I hate to say this, but there probably would be two RFPs in the sense that you do a first RFP to understand what exists, and then you potentially release a second RFP with a very clear ask the
Yeah.
city has after you understand all of the answers to the questions that you're asking.
And after our space needs assessment.
Right,
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
like, the initial, we're gonna say we need this range of space, right?
Yeah.
And then we're gonna hopefully.
So,
Exactly.
in the RFP, it would say, number one priority is the library, the plaza, and parking. And then whatever else you wanna propose within this space, is open to you to figure out. But those three things have to be in this proposal. And so I think that that's where we start. And then we figure out kind of the more detailed, the needs assessment, you know, we say in that first RFP, a needs assessment is coming. And so, yeah, then we get more detailed about what you're, like, does it have to be detached? Does it, do you want just housing? Do you want a hotel? Like, you know, we can maybe start talking about the number of spaces that you need for parking, things like that. So, I think that that's where we're headed, once we figure out what the market even wants to potentially do with the space.
And I would just remember around parking, and I can beat this drum all day, but I won't. I mean, remember with parking, there's different demands during different times of the day. So actually one tremendous opportunity here is that at night, this library lot is very underutilized. And so that's the perfect time for people that are commuting in and out of work. And so you can kind of make all the things work together. Yeah, there are gonna be times where everybody wants to park there, but that's why mixed-use parking garages actually can be really successful and can actually cut down your demand for
And
parking.
as an economic development person, when I have over demands for parking, that's a good thing. That means that there are things that people want to participate in, right? And so. No, well, no, I am, because parking is in my department.
Concert at your library.
Yeah.
Does the RFP have to include a plan for a temporary library or the temporary plan?
Yeah, it would have to be in partnership probably. So we would have to figure out together what that would look like. And I think we've kind of tossed around a whole bunch of ideas what a temporary library would look like, but essentially we would be renting space somewhere else. I don't know where that would be yet, but we would have to have a library in the interim.
In talking about doing the renovations, we talked about, so we brainstormed a little bit on
Yeah,
that.
okay.
But in doing the renovations, also one of the options was that we just sort of shift. We come over here, they
Yeah.
work over there, and we lose some other stuff. So, but
Yeah.
this would potentially be more disruptive. Have you had it, once again, I tipped off on my list a little early. Have you spoken with anyone who has done this? Because a lot of the resources here were written at a time when things were just being launched, just being announced, in the very enthusiastic early stages. I would be curious to hear, you know, from somebody who's had it up and running for now, in the partnership up and running for like 5 years down the road, or 2 years down the road, and you know, if we did decide to go ahead with this, there might be some lessons learned the hard way by other people that we could capitalize on.
Yeah, I think that's an essential part of that second section. Once we hear back from the market, then I think we start to see lessons learned and do our research on exactly what our needs are and what our needs aren't and what we need to make it work for us.
Yeah, our needs assessment is even more vital than we thought it was.
Yeah.
But that's coming. That's coming.
Yeah.
Now, dancing around the side of the issue, there has been environmental concerns with the plaza renovation. Were we to go into partnership with a developer who wants to do something grand, that might also require digging into places that have environmental concerns.
Yeah, I mean, now that you brought it up, I think I want to be clear about what the environmental is, because it makes it sound really bad. We have asbestos.
Yeah, I mean, we're living.
Shocker.
We're living.
Right.
Welcome to Nashua, nothing else nasty, so that's good. Yeah, so, yeah, but here again, this is interesting, because it could really potentially reduce the impact to the city.
Yeah.
if you make it part of a larger redevelopment,
Ah,
developers are
because
much
then-
more adept at dealing with these environmental issues than
Interesting.
we are on a piece-by-piece basis. I mean, we're fairly experienced with it, but like any economy of scale issue, if you're doing a large redevelopment with contractors all mobilized and people on retainer, it's actually pretty easy to come in and get rid of all those things in one fell swoop.
And
So-
if it's a public, if it's the public-private, the private people would take care of theirs.
Yeah, and they would appreciate the environmental we've done. I mean,
That's-
as
yeah,
much as
that's
we
true.
know there are likely asbestos-containing materials there, we know they're there. That saves them a level of investigation. It gives them the ability to be more prepared and more honed in their response. So it's actually a good thing that we kind of know what's going on out there. And they're gonna find out immediately, like, there's an active DES asbestos cap right here. It's public knowledge. So,
Yeah,
you know.
there's not much you can get.
Yeah, there's not much we can, and fortunately, that cap area is not really an area that is likely to be building. It's
Okay.
more likely to be, you know, recreational or active public space or something like that. Because the topography sort of limits the ability to build super close to the river itself. You sort of are gonna be
Yeah.
pushed back into the core of the site if you're doing anything.
Which makes it great kind of plaza public space potential.
Yeah.
So I think where we wanna go with this is starting to understand what your non-negotiables, what your needs are. With the needs assessment, I think, we'll definitely be needing that. But just kind of start thinking about what those are, as we're going through this initial process. Because we're gonna come back to you in January and say, do any of these look good? Like, are they gonna work for what you need?
I will say, I was with Scott, that, I would like us to be, I still can't find the right word. It's not necessarily detached, but I don't want a developer saying, oh yeah, we've got this great thing, we're gonna have apartments and people can come down in their pajamas and be right in the middle of the library. So yeah, so we have, the library has a private entrance, the library can control, and security for our employees too, you know, and
They
they're.
work upstairs though.
What if there was like a Starbucks inside? I don't know.
That's actually,
Oh,
well, in
really?
my head, I was like, oh, it's very much Barnes and Noble and like, where they have
Well,
like a cafe or.
At Tulsa, Oklahoma, the library operates Starbucks.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
May I just ask a quick, because I think I understand, so would you be okay if the library were independent in that it's locked off, but it's inside another building? Because I think, frankly, I think this is kind of a threshold issue where if it has to be a separate building, that's a very different.
My reason for
Yeah.
sharing that was
Yeah.
I want, the library has been seen in Nashua as a community center where everybody is welcome. And I wouldn't want, if people were living upstairs above the library or around the library, for them to say, hey, I live here, they shouldn't be here. Like, I really want it to still be open. I think that's my,
Yeah.
And I-
People would not feel like it's super accessible, like
Yeah.
you want, our door to be our door.
yeah, and once again, that kind of speaks to, that kind of speaks to the branch versus the main library. I mean, Boston is looking at doing this, but they're not looking at doing it with the main Boston Public Library. They're looking at doing it with a branch. And we are, and as I say, we're for the whole community, not just
Yeah.
whatever the development ends up being. And there's also a certain perception, I think, if we're the ground floor of something, then we're just another shop. Whereas if this is the library, this is the center, this is an important building for our community, that sends a different message.
Okay.
And, I mean, we don't have to be the Hunt building with the tower, or, you know,
Yeah.
but there is something to be said for not just being tucked in with something else.
One of the kind of public-private partnerships I looked into is Spokane Library.
I'm gonna be there next week, I'm gonna visit.
Oh,
yeah.
Perfect.
My sister-in-law lives in Coeur d'Alene, big
Oh,
nice.
Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah, so I'm gonna visit it next week.
Yeah, so
I'll go back.
they have this beautiful river walk area with parks at different levels along the hill. They have a gondola across the water, but their library is on the first 2 floors of the building, and then they have a conference center and like a ballroom on the second. And so they're 2 businesses, so it's the library and this business that runs. But it's also kind of a public space, right? So anyone can rent out the space. So those kinds of ideas, we don't wanna cut them off at the knees yet, but as we get proposals, then we can start to look at exactly what, maybe it's not gonna work, right? So I think that we need to continue to have like open discussion about what that looks like going forward.
When is this, space need assessment gonna be done?
Well, it should be, purchasing has it should go out in the next week or 2, and if we follow the schedule, I would like, the proposals will be back at somewhere in the last week of September. We'll choose a vendor, and then the process itself takes about 9 months. So long story short, we're about a year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
No, we don't have a lot of time, and this could be, just open Pandora's box, but I'm just wondering if, we haven't made a decision on Mount Pleasant yet, and I'm just wondering as a temporary library space, if that space was available, and still owned by the city, if that would be a good temporary, but I know that no decision has been made yet, so I don't know.
I mean,
I'm not gonna say anything.
I think we should, that's a great question.
You've opened a Pandora's box.
Yeah,
But it's
Yeah.
definitely something to think about.
I think we will, oh my God, political answer again.
There's no parking.
We will look at public spaces first, I think if there's a
Yeah.
need for any temporary facility.
There's,
Yeah.
well, I guess you could go up on the playground, that's true.
I was gonna say,
If you-
can I have a park?
You would be able to go up on the playground, there would be parking.
Yeah, and I would imagine that any temporary space is gonna need some investment, to
Yeah,
make it
for
workable for the interim.
Close my school.
So don't think about, don't stop thinking about ideas because of, it needs a parking lot or something like that, so. Yeah,
But only the school board can decide the future.
right.
There you go, there you go, there you go. We're running out of time, but this end of the table has been kind of monopolizing things, Lori, and I feel I'm not being a good hostess.
No, I think you are, and I think these are all good ideas. I mean, like you said, you can't answer questions because you don't know what's out there.
Yeah.
And it's a little scary, thinking that maybe this could be crunched into something else that we might not like. But it's a big open box right now that you have to kind of wait and see what's out there, and hopefully someone comes back with something that's really, really exciting.
And
That's my hope.
Do we feel like does the board need to vote on this? Is this a decision the board's making to say yes? Or is
Yeah,
this
it
just
sounds,
sensing the temperature?
it sounds to me, one of my questions was, what's the timeline and what's the escape route? But it sounds to me.
The escape group is saying no to all of our proposals that we get.
I mean,
It sounds to me, you're saying it is a non-binding RFP, so
Yes.
this is information gathering to help us decide whether we want to move forward, not committing to anything, no for sale signs are gonna be banged in our front yard or, okay.
Nothing, yeah.
The escape route is there would be many, many, many other pieces of legislation needed to actually move forward with anything. And so this is like, last night I was looking at the city history of legislation. There have been so many RFPs out there that have not gone anywhere. I'm not saying that's what's gonna happen here, in fact, I hope it does, but, this is just a starting point. I will just say on the voting idea, that's somewhat up to you. I just would say that if you do vote, I would be fairly broad in whatever that motion might be, and it's supporting the issuance of a non-binding RFP for conceptual planning of the library site. I don't know, maybe that's it.
Write that down.
The issuance of a non-binding RFP.
Yeah, I think it's to support the issuance of a non-binding RFP for a redevelopment of the library site to include, at a minimum, a library.
And for me,
Sorry.
yeah, I have 3 non-negotiables, is the library, the parking, and the plaza, or a green space of some sort, yeah.
Jen, you get down there?
If we did say no to all your proposals, or all the proposals, is the plan B, we just go back to the ad hoc committee every year and ask for $2 million at a time? Is that, it's gotta be
Or do
the
fundraising,
alternate,
or
or
do-
do.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, there's other ideas, and this is just one idea. So I think that yes and no. So the path that you're on right now is go back to the committee and try to get them to prioritize this as part of their bonding process. So that's the path you're on right now.
I think it's fine, the idea, I'm not super comfortable with it, but we are in a place where we really do need to look at options. I really wish the city would invest more, but can't really do anything about it now. So I think the idea of exploring a public-private partnership, I'm fine with putting it out there, just.
But non-binding,
Yeah.
find out, is there, I mean, people may come back and say, forget it. You know,
Yeah,
I'm not-
I'm in the same spot that you are. I have no idea what this could look like,
I mean, there are some,
and
there are
it
some
might
exciting
not,
things.
might not be the right solution for us. So this is just an exploratory kind of idea at this point. I'm just trying to find a way to get a library that works for us. And in a way that could be less expensive for us, and could come a little faster than what the ad hoc committee could do.
Well, that, I
Yeah,
mean,
it's worth exploring.
Yeah.
I think, what do you feel, folks? Do we take an official vote, then we are officially on record? Or do we, I think that the tenor of the discussion has been, it never hurts to ask questions.
Yeah.
But we're not agreeing that this is definitely the best path. for us.
Hesitant but interested, is that?
Does having our support and emotion help with any of the other conversations you have coming up?
I think support always helps.
Yeah.
And-
It would help.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
And then here's my other question. And that is, who gets the final word?
I don't know.
When you say final word,
In other words, I mean, I'm an assessor.
Library
correct?
property.
I'm an
Say
assessor.
yes or no to that, basically.
Right.
We are in some ways a tenant because we don't own our property. And it is a possibility down the road that the BOA gets really excited and we don't like the design at all. I mean, it's always been a who's, who.
that is
I would not want to.
I guess it is a possibility, but the tone of the conversation
Okay, yeah, you-
leads me to believe that that would not happen, and that it would be a collaborative decision.
Yeah.
But I think
I think
the
so.
Board of Aldermen do have an authority here.
I mean, that's.
I would hope it would be a collaborative decision. I mean, would be my,
Yeah, well, that's, and
if
that's
I'm
good.
still, around in here, yes.
Yeah, I
Well, I've got 3.5 more years.
good, no.
And I believe that the Aldermen are looking to all of us to sort of find some other ways to do this. And so I think we're in a very good place, but ultimately we can just go in a different direction. I can't say no, but I don't think we're close to that.
I think we are a small portion of the board, and I think, maybe come September, we should put this back on the agenda, when we've got Padma and David here as well. And then we can, we may have some more information from the results, and we can talk some more about it then.
Does that work for you guys if you
For moving
need, by
forward?
January, if you have to have the RFP?
I think our infrastructure committee is at the end of the month.
Yeah, I guess my only question would be, would this sampling of the board be comfortable with us indicating, number one, you're gonna talk about it further in September, but two, that generally you were open to supporting this potentially, but there needed to be further conversation? I guess we wanna reflect that we talked to you about it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
supporting issuing
Could
the
could I have a motion that expresses the board's openness to learning more about this opportunity?
I'll second it.
I can't make that motion.
Oh, I move that we, I move that the present members of the board, are interested in learning more about the RFP.
The results.
The result, yeah.
Wait, I'm unclear. Are we interested in learning about the results of are we interested in the RFP going out and we wanna learn about the results of the RFP? Or are we interested in learning more about what the RFP might look like?
We're.
I'm unclear what we're moving.
We're interested in the information the RFP might provide us about.
Yeah, okay, I think so. I don't think the four of us should hold up the RFP process.
No, I mean, they're gonna vote whether we.
Yeah,
vote or not.
okay.
Yeah.
So can we move to,
We have a
Oh,
motion,
we have a motion.
we have a motion on the floor.
I can withdraw my motion, you can come up with a new motion.
I guess it wasn't clear.
Well, do it for me.
It wasn't clear based on the motion, what we were doing.
We are,
Can we rephrase it?
Yeah, if you wanna go ahead and rephrase it, I'll withdraw my motion, you can
okay,
rephrase it.
go for it.
Can we move that that we're stating our, I don't know how to phrase it, we're stating our support for the exploratory, non-binding RFP to provide more information about the library's options?
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded.
Aye.
Aye, we have to vote, there we go, okay, now we
Is
can
that
vote.
okay?
Thank you, we peppered you with a lot of questions, but.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Sorry we don't have more answers.